Well, hello again. Thank you for having us in your living room. We have really a very challenging and just an exciting presentation from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 11. Some really important things are going to happen in this story. So I hope you have your notepad. If you're going to take notes, maybe grab your Bible if you want to follow along. I just pray that this story will be a blessing for you. I want to go to the picture that Sherry brings us today. It's another one of her pictures of the Alaska snowy owl that fly down the Pacific coast to the Washington along Long Beach, and they come down and nest there. And this guy is sitting out there, and you need to know that this grass is like 3 or 4 feet tall, and this owl is sitting on a log. But this is a pretty good sized bird. And look at the expression. I mean, what an extraordinary picture. And not everybody gets to see them. So Sherry got a call to come when they were down on the beach. So thank you, Sherry, for just taking us there for just a moment. What a lovely, lovely animal. So, Gospel of Mark, chapter 11. Our title today is Temple Corruption. Now, there's really an important sequence in this story today. And I want to challenge you to pay careful attention to how Mark has laid out this story for us. Now, I told you last time when we talked about the fig tree that we would pick it up in our next conversation. Well, that is today. So let's get into the story. And this fig tree is a central point in Mark chapter 11. So let's begin. Verse 13. Seen at a distance, a fig tree in leaf. He, that is Jesus, went to see if perhaps he would find anything on it. And when he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for it was not the season for figs. Now, let me explain this so you have a little better understanding. The fig tree would have bloomed and would have figs on it before the leaves were fully unfurled. So what's really extraordinary about this tree is that all the leaves are out, implying that there should have been fruit on it, but when he investigated, there weren't any figs. I call this the pretentious fig tree. It looked good. Everything about it was right, except it had no fruit. That is the point. The tree had no fruit. Now we'll pick this conversation up as we move through the story. Now listen to what Jesus said to the tree. He said to it, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." And his disciples were listening. So Jesus cursed the fig tree. That's really, really important. I cannot stress how important that is. So, the tree that bore no fruit gets cursed. Let's go to verse 15. Then they came to Jerusalem. And Jesus entered the temple and began to drive out those who were buying and selling in the temple. Now, this is an exciting story. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who were selling doves. Now, just pause here for a moment. He comes in. Most stories will tell you in the other Gospels that he had a whip in his hand, and he's snapping that. It's like a cat of nine tails kind of thing. And he is swinging that, and he is turning the tables over, and the merchants are fleeing. Now, what were the merchants selling? First of all, you could not use Roman currency in the temple. You had to do a currency exchange. So there were money changers there. They made a commission. Every time you gave them a dime and they gave you a dime of temple money, there was a commission for them. And then they were selling animals so that you could go and do your sacrifice. Now remember, in Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers and Deuteronomy, the animal you took to sacrifice was supposed to be the best animal in the flock or herd. So when Jesus is overturning the tables, the money changers, and the seats of those who were selling doves, and he would not permit anyone, in verse 16, to carry merchandise through the temple. This is the cleansing of the temple, and he is driving the crooks out. There's just no better way to say that, because they were selling the least of animals, and they were cheating on the exchange of the temple offerings. And Jesus would have nothing of it in the temple. After all, this is where people came to worship him and his Father and the Holy Spirit. The cleansing of the temple was an action-packed moment. I just wished I could see the faces of the disciples. I'm not sure if it would move from horrified to just total shock, because they are just learning what is unfolding in front of them. Verse 17. He began to teach and say to those that remained, as things now are calmed down, "Is it not written, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all the nations? But you have made it a robber's den." You see, there was unrestricted corruption being run by the priests in Jesus' day in that temple. And where it was supposed to be one of the more sacred experiences for each individual, it had been contaminated and corrupted with greed. That's a sad story. But Jesus set this house in order. And he called it for what it was. So imagine, after the commotion, those who are disabled or disenfranchised, the widows, children, many needing healing or forgiveness, sitting around Jesus as he teaches of God's redeeming love. You see, this is the purpose of the temple. It was a place to go and meet God. Look, history tells us that the money changers are overcharging for the purchase of temple coins. The animals are not the best of the herd, but the least of the herd, and yet being sold for top dollar, so you may have an offering. Jesus is removing greed and abuse and corruption. That was a profound moment in the history of the temple. Maybe one of the most significant things to ever happen in its history. Notice how Matthew records it. I don't often go to the other Gospels because we're studying Mark, but I want you we're going to go through a few verses in Matthew for a moment. Notice what it says in Matthew 21, verse 14. "And the blind and the lame came to him in the temple, and he healed them. But when the chief priests and the scribes saw the wonderful things he had done, and the children who were shouting in the temple, 'Hosanna to the Son of David,' the priests became indignant." And in verse 16, "And they said to Jesus, 'Did you hear what these children are saying?' And Jesus said to them, 'Yes. Have you never read, out of the mouth of the infants and the nursing babies, you have prepared praise for yourself?'" Now, that is a quote from Psalms 8, verse 2. Psalms 8 is all about the coming Messiah. And Jesus just said that the prophecy in that psalm was about him. Praise for him. Let me read it to you one more time. "And said to him," that's the priest, "Do you hear what these children are saying?" And Jesus said to them, "Yes." Have you never read out of the mouth of infants and nursing babies, you have prepared praise for yourself? And what are these children doing? Shouting, Hosanna. Wow. Everything is calm. Jesus is ministering to those who are deeply in need. And what is the attitude of the priests here? They are indignant. Now, please remember, we started this conversation with you about a fig tree that did not have any figs on it, though it looked like and acted like and was beautiful as if it was laden with fruit. It was ahead of all the other trees in the orchard, but it did not bear fruit. That is the context in the Gospel of Mark for the cleansing of the temple. And what is the attitude of the priests towards Jesus? Is this not an amazing story? Now, in Mark 11, we're going back now to verse 18. The chief priests and the scribes heard this and began seeking how to destroy him. You could say how to murder him, how to kill him. For they were afraid of him. Why? Because that big crowd there in the temple, in that courtyard, the whole crowd was in awe, marveling, astonished at the things that Jesus was teaching them. This is a profound moment for the nation of Israel. It is a profound moment for the chief priests and the scribes. And in this moment, instead of recognizing Jesus, he just proclaimed to them, and they knew what was in Psalms 8, verse 2. They knew what he was quoting. It was the perfect opportunity for them to acknowledge Jesus was the promised coming Messiah. The crowd is thrilled at the good news of the gospel Jesus is teaching. Psalms 8:2. We have seen how Jesus applied this passage to the Jewish children. Now, who seeing his miracles cried out in the temple, Hosanna to the Son of David. We have seen how the enemy and the avenger of the chief priests and the scribes were offended because of these things. This is extraordinary. Notice how Adam Clarke continues this quote. And as the psalm wholly concerns Jesus Christ, it is most probable that in this act of the Jewish children, the prophecy had its primary fulfillment and was left to the Jews as a witness and a sign of the Messiah, which they should have acknowledged when our Lord Jesus Christ directed their attention to it. In other words, what Adam Clarke is saying in his commentary that I just quoted to you is this was their moment to acknowledge who Jesus was. And instead they are plotting murder. Fascinating time, isn't it? Challenging time. Just let this sink in how challenging this story is and how important it is. But I think we're going to learn how important this story is to you and I. In verse 19 of Mark 11, when evening came, they would go out of the city. So in other words, they go into the temple. There's the driving out of, may I say, the crooks, the criminals, the cheaters, greed is removed, corruption is gone, and at the end of the day, Jesus and his disciples, that entourage, would gather together and then they would leave the city. They would head back out probably to Bethany, and on the way, in verse 20, in Mark 11, now we come back to that fig tree. As they were passing by in the morning, they saw the fig tree withered from the roots up. Now, I did not find you a picture of a withered fig tree. Shame on me. I am sorry. But I do have a picture of what a fig tree in Israel looks like. That would have been the tree Jesus was looking for figs on. That was beautiful and had all the appearance that figs had appeared on it. Everything else in the orchard was still trying to unfurl leaves. There was just a tree that looked like it should have been producing fruit. Now Jesus goes to the temple, and what is going on? Corruption, greed, cheating the people. Now we come back to the fig tree, and it's withered, completely dead from the roots up to the top. I'm just going to say it to you right now. When Jesus cursed the fig tree, he did it as a prophetic story referring to the nation of Israel. Now, this is really significant because Israel was placed as a nation at the crossroads of the trade routes of the known world. God placed them there in what was called the Promised Land, first of all, because of the abundance and the gifts that he gave to sustain them. But more than that, they had a purpose and a mission. And that was that in their location, they were placed so that people trading from Egypt going up into the north country and people coming from the east over to the west in that known part of the world, that they would encounter the most blessed people on this earth. And their purpose was to proclaim to the known world the compassion and the love of God for them as strangers and pilgrims and foreigners. But what did Jesus meet when he came as the Messiah? They plotted to do away with him, to murder him. Which means that, like the fig tree that looked as though it ought to have been full of some fresh fruit, so Israel, because of its spiritual leadership, was not blessing the world around it. And Jesus gave this profound illustration. Now, here's what's really important about this. This story is ancient. It's back then, a couple thousand years ago. But I want you to know that this story is as much about Israel as it is about the new church Jesus was starting. Let's go to verse 21 in Mark 11. Being reminded, Peter said to him, Master, Rabbi, Teacher, that's what that word means. Look, the fig tree which you cursed has withered. And Jesus answered, now pay attention to the answer, saying to the disciples, have faith in God. Now, why did he say that? In the temple, what was the illustration that the people had faith in? Ritual, duty. The priesthood looked right, acted right, ate right, dressed right, did all those things right. But did they have faith in God? Or were they like that pretentious fig tree, and did they just simply have faith in themselves? So when Jesus says to his disciples, have faith in God, he's saying, be exactly the opposite of what you have just seen. Live by faith alone in God, that you may be a blessing to those around you. Because when you replace your faith with duty, when you replace your faith with good behavior and ritual, when you replace your faith with how well and how obedient you're doing, we begin to repeat the same thing that Jesus addressed with ancient Israel. Having faith in God is the opposite. Living by faith in God is the opposite of duty and behavioral theology. This is the challenge for the new church Jesus is preparing the disciples for. Faith, the willingness to say yes to God no matter what the rest of the world thinks. Faith is the key to the success and the future of the church, as surely as it was for ancient Israel. But ancient Israel replaced its faith with its perfect obedience and ritual and behavior. And maybe there's so much of that going on in the Christian church today, we are not paying enough attention, and maybe there's more power in the church if we exercised faith rather than duty. The pretentious fig tree, the withered fig tree that did not bear fruit, that Jesus said no one would eat of, did represent Israel. You see, I'll say it again, they were blessed in every way by God. No other nation in the world received such an abundance of blessing. But they neglected sharing the blessing with the rest of the world. If you want to see our future, sometimes you need to look at the past, because as human beings, we tend to repeat past behavior easier than we realize. Look, the withered fig tree that did not bear fruit, what are we doing today in the church? Are we like this lovely tree that's beautiful, full of greenery, it looks like we're fully alive, but are we just self-consumed? Are we just relishing in how good we are doing? My goodness, we go to church every week, and my goodness, we give our offerings, and we send money off to mission fields, and we have a whole list of the good that we do. Are we pretentious, though? Are we failing just to share the love of God with each other and others who are in need of the good news? Because in the temple, that's where we find Jesus, ministering to those who just need to hear of God's love. That is the last message to go to this world. Are we like this pretentious tree, self-consumed? I can't answer that question. You have to answer that question. What is it like in your church? How much of your church is outward moving? How much of your church is consumed with the right clothes and the right look and the right music and the right preacher and the right sermon versus reaching out to embrace the people that Jesus wants to minister his love to? That withered tree that did not bear fruit, having faith in God implies God is manifesting his unconditional love in us to bless the world around us with the truth of his love. Let's take a look at verse 23. Mark 11:23, truly I say to you. Now, remember, have faith in God was the last words Jesus spoke. Whoever says to this mountain, be taken up and cast into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that what he says is going to happen, it will be granted to him. Aha! This is faith. It is believing that God, when we are in harmony with him, We are looking outward and we are saying yes to God no matter what the rest of the world. God is anxious to answer our prayer of faith. What do you think about that? What's this image of God who's leaning over? Maybe he stands up and looks and sees you, and he's saying, I just can't wait to answer your prayer, that you may bless others. Verse 24, therefore I say to you, all things for which you pray and ask, believe that you have received them and they will be granted to you. This is the foundation of the new church, that in their growth, in their experience, in their ministry, God's anticipation, I want to answer your prayer of faith, your confession of your inability, that only God can empower you to accomplish his purpose. He wants his church to be successful. He wants it to have all the blessing that the church can possibly have if we have faith in God. Unlike the pretentious tree, to actually have fruit that will bless another. That's our challenge. And it's a huge challenge for us. I think today, maybe more so than Israel. I want to go to our closing picture, just one of those beautiful first snow of the season pictures. The season is changing. This is October. We're expecting a couple of feet of snow in the Sierras and maybe a foot or two in the Cascades. And Sherry just happened to snap this beautiful picture of that first little bit of snow that comes in the sawtooth. Thank you, Sherry, so much for that. Go back and read Mark 11. I hope you're blessed. Have an awesome rest of your day. Thank you so much for listening.